Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. My name is Randy Kenyatta Rao. I'll be your moderator today for the Chesapeake Research Consortium's Roundtable, which is a monthly virtual seminar series. Our intention is to host targeted, inclusive, and informed conversations that match scientific advances and management needs. The webinars are designed for contribution, not consumption. So each seminar invites a new and diverse range of researchers, managers, and other professionals to have a conversation around critical topics. The point of this particular activity is to build connectivity between all of us and to increase our collective competency for decision making, which is so critical in our work. As a reflection of that intent, the panelists that you see today have been given about uh, you know some time to total provide introductory remarks and allowing for some discussions afterwards and some Q&A. This is all about us, the collective, giving us a place to ask the clumsy questions and to practice the bravery and humility necessary for building the future we want. These webinars are recorded and past seminars are available on the CRC website. And I would encourage you to also check out the portfolios, profiles for each one of our summer interns. And also to review these specific, these especially if you have missed some of the past discussions. Also on our website, we have our symposium recorded that has just gone up. That was a few weeks ago, if you want to check that out as well. So if you haven't already, please type the name of your organization into the chat box so that everyone can see our webinar community for today's panel discussion. We also ask that you stay muted with your camera off while speakers are presenting. All right, and again, my name is Randy Rowell. I'm the program coordinator for the C-Stream program. C-Stream is a very unique program in the sense that it is, geared towards scientists that have been, much marginalized from the field. And today's theme is mostly about, what does restoring the Chesapeake Bay mean? The conversation lately has recognized that turning back time is impossible. We can restore the bay to a better functioning version of itself, but it will never be the same as it was in the 1800s with imposing pressures from climate change, population growth, land use changes, and more. So with the 2025 deadline for the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement goals, widely, and we have that here, hard copy, widely acknowledged to be a miss, we want to start envisioning what a restored bay might realistically look like. And although their input is valuable, several voices are left out of the conversation when only experts weigh in on some of these questions, especially those who are just starting their careers, will be enacting the communication, research, and management to see a better bay achieved. What do they envision in terms of the bay? The scientific community, diversity, and inclusion. So this is a really unique roundtable in the sense that we're leaning on the wisdom and input from some of the younger generation, younger scientists in the industry, as well as some of our more well-groomed. So we want to thank you again for coming here today. So our first guest we have is a great friend of mine, Eric Mickelson. He's a deputy director for Anne Arundel County's Department of Public Works, and he's heading its Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration. He also works to facilitate the recovery of the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries through supporting robust restoration projects and rigorous scientific monitoring efforts, bolstered by diverse stakeholder partnerships. Eric has an extensive background as a project manager for an environmental consultant, then as an executive director for a nonprofit, the Arundel Rivers Federation, formerly known as the South River Federation. working for the county since 2014 as the county builds up its environmental assessments, restoration, implementation, and ecological evaluation to support the county's clean water obligations under the municipal separate storm sewer systems MS4 permit and Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load TMDLs. Eric also serves as Anne Arundel County's senior environmental policy officer. And as working as the chair of the City of Annapolis Environmental Commission, worked closely with Eric here and there. He also handed me my certificate from Master Watershed Stewards Academy back in 2015. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm no longer one of the young, fresh voices in the community, but it sounds like we've got a couple of those leading after me, so that'll be great to hear. I'm going to share my screen here in terms of a little presentation that I put together. Let's see. And talk a little bit about some of the things Anne Arundel County has been up to. I appreciate that introduction. I've been in the position for about 10 years. Anne Arundel County has been doing restoration for a long time. And with that lead in that Randy provided, I think this statement, in terms of us not being able to go back to the Captain John Smith days, there's certainly a reality to that. But I do think actually that there's a lot of value in understanding sort of the relatively recent pre-colonial history of the Chesapeake and having that inform our restoration options. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. One of the things for us that's been really interesting is to look back again, what's been the historical configuration of our landscape in the pre-colonial period. And one of the things that you find, and there's a growing literature on this, it seems like by the year at this point, is the expansiveness of beaver habitation of the lowlands throughout the landscape, throughout all of North America, really. But obviously in the Chesapeake region as well. Dr. Grace Brush at Johns Hopkins University has done some really fascinating work looking at the evolution of the Bay watershed over time and sort of the changes in the landscape in terms of natural history. One of the big things that obviously occurred also with the beginning of the colonial period was just massive land clearing. There was a tremendous amount of clearing for agriculture so that land was more usable for the growing population. But there were obviously no sediment and erosion control practices. There wasn't a lot of thought given in terms of soil loss as a result. And what we found now through research that's been conducted over the past 10 or 20 years is that the tremendous amounts of sediment left that colonial landscape, went down into our stream valleys, went down into our tidewater areas, and created sort of a legacy sediment situation is how that's referred to now, and has sort of created an issue that is unseen for a lot of folks who've grown up in the last 30, 40, 50 years. It really happened prior to that. So this is a picture of me with a little bit more hair standing on the sediment that was stored up behind a mill dam in Anne Arundel County. The mill dam breached decades ago, and then the stream, as we see it here, cut down through that mill dam sediment. And to sort of the untrained eye, this looks like just about most of the stream valleys that any of us have probably seen growing up or walking around the Bay watershed. But it's actually a significantly disturbed system, and it's important for us to understand that historical disturbance in terms of our future focused restoration efforts as well. Of course, in more contemporary times throughout the Bay region, the solution to dealing with the stormwater runoff caused by development activity that's occurred over the last 50 or 60 years has been really to put that stormwater into pipes to get it off the developed landscape and then to deliver it to the either nearest body of water or the nearest sort of natural area where it's not going to cause problems for development. And that's caused its own sets of issues. This is a tributary called Towser's Branch, which is one of the Patuxent River tributary systems that was badly eroded, where we were able to go back in and create a step pool system basically to capture, detain runoff to get that water back into the ground like it had been historically, with some obviously artificial engineering, but really to try to replicate the functionality of that system before it was disturbed. In our developed Chesapeake watershed, we obviously also have lots of modern utilities. This is a sewer main running through a stream valley that was exposed as a result of erosion. And that's not uncommon in most of the urbanized areas throughout the watershed region. And so there's an opportunity with restoration for us both to protect infrastructure as well as, again, to replicate sort of those historical systems, those integrated stream wetland systems that existed on the landscape with some modification in a contemporary setting. So this is the restoration project at a site called Cat Branch, where that sewer pipe was buried, wetland was created above it. That was immediately after construction. This is a couple of years after construction. Beautiful wetlands, lots of wildlife, lots of wetland vegetation, a real wide variety of vegetation, and again, an opportunity to put back on the landscape a simulation essentially of what had been there historically, and to try to get the functional benefits of that kind of system. I'm not going to go too far into the weeds on some of the engineering details, but I suspect that some of the folks who are on this call probably are in the water resources engineering field or would like to go into the water resources engineering field, which is obviously critical for informing and shaping the design. This image just shows the ability of restoration, again, using sort of these novel approaches that approximate the functionality of these historic systems in dampening what's called the hydrograph, essentially the pulse of stormwater that's generated after a storm event in developed landscape. The red spikes that you see there are above a restoration project. The black line that you see, which is significantly dampened in terms of discharges, below the restoration project. So there's the possibility of us using restoration to help roll back some of these effects of historical urbanization and to really, like I say, replicate both from a water quality and from a flooding perspective the systems that were here previously. This is one example I want to point out, which was a particularly challenging site. This is an aerial of an area called Furnace Branch in Glen Burnie. You can see the blue line that in this aerial image, that's basically all concrete trapezoidal channel. That was state-of-the-art stormwater management in 1965. Again, like I say, you collect the water from the developed landscape, you jet it down to the Patapsco River, and never mind the fact that it's loaded with trash or nutrients or whatever else, it's not causing a flooding issue at that point. So we've learned a little bit, I like to think, in the last 50 years, and we were able to go into that system again, remove or bury the concrete channel and to recreate, like I say, an integrated stream and wetland system in an area that has not a ton of stormwater management. That's fairly urbanized, developed in the 50s and 60s, really without contemporary stormwater management, but to replicate, again, these kinds of features that we believe were historically present and that are beneficial both for water quality, for habitat, and for flood attenuation, if we put our minds to it. So there's lots of opportunities for us to do that work within the county. There's also opportunities for us to engage communities. This was a project that Randy and several of his colleagues who were incredibly involved in and basically saw happen. Was an issue where there had been flooding issues through a cemetery at a church in the Broadneck Peninsula. Basically, the stormwater had been piped through the middle of the graveyard. And through installing a series of practices to provide water quality and creating some better conveyance options, the cemetery has been protected. These historical graves have been protected, and then water quality has also been added to an area where there really wasn't any before. We've engaged communities throughout the county, and one of the things that I think is oftentimes surprising to folks is the amount of resourcefulness in terms of just residents and other people. There are people who live in our communities who are engineers, who are project managers, or who are just able to tap into the right folks and really make very interesting, exciting projects happen, oftentimes through public grant programs in conjunction with the efforts that the county or state are undertaking. And we think it's important to engage those folks in helping to restore their own communities as well. There's also a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of discussion of climate resilience, trying to figure out how do we minimize the carbon footprint of restoration projects. So there are some innovative things going on in terms of trying to figure out how to beneficially reuse material, how to cut down on some of the hauling costs for projects. And we're able to incentivize those kinds of things through our grant programs as well. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the innovative things that Anne Arundel County is doing. I'm happy to answer questions after the other speakers have gone, and look forward to engaging with you all. So again, thanks for the opportunity to talk today.
All right, thank you so much, Eric. And we had Suzanne Dorsey from Maryland Department of Environment as our greeting speaker at the symposium a few weeks ago. And what dawned on me was that, the state and the county and the city and local regions, how much this science communications that come out of these internships at with NOAA and NCBO, and Chesapeake Bay Program, and all these other organizations is so critical and so cutting edge. It's really new, and can be a great help to things. Just a quick explanation, really. The Chesapeake Research Consortium's C-Stream program, for those that may not know, stands for the Chesapeake Student Recruitment, Early Advisement, and Mentoring Program. And its main focus is on recruiting, advising, and mentoring college students from populations who have been historically excluded from the environmental field and are underrepresented in environmental research and management professions. For that purpose, this program focuses on assisting students who identify as people of color and who are also first-generation college students. The primary goal of the C-Stream program is to encourage and support students interested in leadership positions in environmental protection and restoration careers. C-Stream also endeavors to support this goal by developing inclusive career pathways that result in more diversity in the environmental workforce. The program works closely with academic institutions as well as government agencies within the Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership to place selected students into meaningful summer internships to support those students in their academic work and facilitate pathways for successful careers in environmental research, restoration, and management. I also want to just say hello to those partners that are here today. So without further ado, I want to introduce our next speaker, Alexis Stelfox. Alexis is a CRC C-Stream intern for this summer. She worked with the Water Quality Goal Implementation Team. Alexis is one of this summer's C-Stream stars, and she joined basically to work with the WQGIT leadership team, and is spending most of her time meeting with partners and technical assistance providers to document and compile stories and examples about best practices for effective capacity building. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Alexis.
Hi, I was going to say good morning, but I realized it's after 12. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a couple slides. And so many tabs open. But okay, so this is capacity building, agricultural best practices, and the future of our bay. And I'm Alexis Stelfox. So a little bit about me is I am a rising sophomore at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, pursuing a degree in geography and environmental science with a certificate in international security studies. So I worked with the C-Stream program under my mentor, Jeremy Hansen. I think I saw him pop in here. Hey, Jeremy. Alongside the WQGIT team and the Chesapeake Bay program. right outside the EPA and CBP office. So one thing that I really, really valued in my time as a C-Stream intern was my ability to kind of shape my project around my interests. So one of my interests that I've always had is local farming and just agriculture in general. So when going about my capacity building project, I was able to kind of shape it around agriculture. So to the left, you can see it's just the title front page of my report that I've been conducting, and I'll post a draft PDF document in the chat box after I'm done presenting. But essentially, the goal of my project was to help build up the capacity of agricultural organizations and see where I can increase capacity in the Chesapeake Bay program and its partners. So I was able to partner with and meet with a bunch of environmental entities which specialize in implementing conservation practices on agriculture land. And for my research findings, I was able to kind of develop a 3-tiered framework of conceptualizing and identifying capacity in agriculture environmental entities. So I was able to gather some valuable insight into the most efficient workplace environment in the agriculture community. So as you can see to the right, I was able to create like a little diagram of the intermingling of the 3 different dimensions of my 3-tiered framework, which is the individual, organization, and enabling environment levels. So kind of the methodology of my research was I was able to meet with a couple conservation district managers and also the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, as well as a few nonprofits. And my approach was a really qualitative and open flow conversation style with the questions that you can see below. And these questions kind of served a purpose of pinpointing overarching themes amongst conservation districts and nonprofits that have been able to build their capacity, have higher capacity, and also looking into where capacity is like lacking in districts. So with my research centering around individuals sharing their experiences with organizational capacity building, I wanted to maintain a very non-structured conversation style, kind of like similar to the roundtables of the Boots on the Ground report, which has been like a huge help in all of my research in capacity building and specifically looking at like technical assistance in the agriculture sector, which has been extremely, extremely helpful. Referencing what I said earlier with my 3-dimensional framework, it was kind of like the bulk of my research and what I was able to gather from all these different organizations that have been able to implement and also have function at very high capacity levels in this sector. And the individual dimension refers to people within an organization, including its staff, volunteers, and leadership, who are able to collectively contribute to an organization's effectiveness and performance. So this dimension recognizes the skills, knowledge, and attitudes, as well as like the motivation of individuals and how much of a key role it plays in the success of an organization. So these capabilities of individuals directly influence how well tasks are executed and decisions are made and objectives are achieved, which is generally like the capacity of an organization. So all 3 of these different like frameworks and levels of this framework are always like intertwined. So like the individuals who are like you are identifying in the individual level are a part of the organization, and then the enabling environment kind of like impacts the organization as well as the individuals who are inside of it. So the organization dimension focuses on the internal structure and processes and as well as resources of an entity, which collectively contributes to its ability to achieve its mission, vision, and goals collectively of the capacity. So all the bullet points that you see right here on the screen are like my biggest points that I've been able to gather from speaking to all these individuals who are heads of organizations or are part of very key parts of organizations specializing in agriculture that have been able to build their capacity over the years and function at such a high level. So the enabling environment dimension refers to external factors and conditions that surround the influence of an organization's operations and performance. So this dimension recognizes that organizations don't operate in isolation, but they're part of like a larger ecosystem. So that includes various stakeholders, policies, regulations, and cultural factors, which is really, really, really important. So there's a lot of value in tailoring initiatives and programs and like interventions in an organization to align with these specific needs. And this localized approaches, especially with agriculture and especially in Pennsylvania, with all the different cultures that are like around just generalized agriculture, not only resonates with the community, but also ensures that efforts are meaningful and sustainable in the long run, which is really, really important when like enacting actual conservation practices on the agriculture land. So through all this research, I learned that everything is just so difficult. Like planting an ag forest buffer takes like over 5 years of checking back in the project, and actual planning aspect seems very fun. But it's just like Randy said at the very beginning, turning back time is a very difficult thing to do. So I hope maybe in the future saving the Chesapeake Bay won't be that hard. But in the future, I see immense value in giving underrepresented communities a spot at the table to have these conversations. So I hope there is an increasing access to public access to the Bay's ecosystem and localized environmental literacy where individuals understand the vitality of the Bay. So when I was around 6 years old, a woman showed up at our door and talked to us about the importance of reducing manure runoff, specifically with chickens on farmland. And she explained all the repercussions of it and how it applied to us. And she even had like a little clipboard to write emails down. And she left for some reason. But then she said she was going to come back for like donations, I think. And I was only 6 years old, but I adored her so much and everything she had to say. And it aligned with my love for local farms, which is kind of weird, like at such a young age. But I've always absolutely loved agriculture and like local like farmers markets. So I drew a picture of a chicken for her and I gave it to her. And I have no idea what happened to it. But that little outreach, even though it wasn't meant for me specifically, inspired me. So I later went on that year to develop a science fair project to design environmentally friendly chicken coops. But all this, like, I kind of have a point, is to stress the importance of outreach. So like outreach to farmers, education outreach, and spending as much information and spreading it to the widest audience possible. So I'm about to be 20, and one of the reoccurring doomsday themes as an aspiring scientist is climate change. So I can't mentally absorb how potentially detrimental this will be for the future of the Chesapeake Bay, but I think the overlap between the Bay and climate change has really driven my academic career, and I stress so much climate resilience when looking at the future of the Bay. It's living resources, public infrastructure, habitats, and communities to withstand the impacts of the inevitably like changing environment and climate conditions is just extremely important when looking at the future. So of course, like wrapping it back to my work, is the ability for environmental organizations to function at their capacity. Absolute dream. So not only having the proper funding and staffing abilities, but being able to like create and work in the best working conditions and the environment without individuals like getting like burnt out, and just like it's honestly amazing for the future. So some of the future for the what I really want to look at is when looking at the restoration community of the Bay is, like I said earlier, like functioning at its capacity, but also for someone in the future from any background to go into this field and not feel marginalized or left out is so important. And that is something that I really want to see in the future. And of course, being able to meet the 2025 goals, that's a thing in itself. And I really believe, and I've learned a lot in the C-Stream internship, that science really informs and influences policy. So I think as much interaction between scientists and policymakers is something that's really important. And specifically for the Bay community, I think the like I said earlier, like policy working with like scientists, but also like localized environmental education programs, the public would be really interesting. Like I said, with the woman I drew a picture of a chicken for, she accidentally influenced my entire academic career and my professional career. Just getting gathering that type of information is so important. And then something that I really stressed in my report and all the research I've been doing is making people feel like their work makes an impact, because some people in this field don't really feel like, they feel like their work might be too passive and they don't really see a lot of their projects on the ground. But I really want to stress this, especially when thanking everyone, that every person in this field has influenced and inspired me to keep going and know that I really have a place in my love for the Chesapeake Bay. And I would like to thank my mentor, Jeremy, who I believe is in here, Sushant and Jackie, who worked alongside me my whole project. Of course, C-Stream, and a big shout out to Randy. And I would just like to thank everyone who has worked alongside me and everyone in this field. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexis. And Alexis, you've been such a rock star this summer, and your leadership and your boldness, your ability to take on new challenges and new activities and really stepping up. That's nothing or something that is not to be, downsided.
Thank you so much.
So thank you again. And, also what makes what you're doing so important is that, you're setting the precedent for what the future may look like for things like the Chesapeake Community Modeling Program, which is a CRC biannual conference, which will convene this year in 2024, June 10th through the 12th in Annapolis. And, with the significant progress that has been made towards restoring the Chesapeake Bay, like you mentioned, around water quality and living resources, restoration efforts face even steeper significant challenges as we enter the third decade of the 21st century. Perhaps the biggest challenge is maintaining progress in the face of a changing natural and human environment. So global warming and sea level rise, affecting temperatures. We've had the most record-breaking high temperatures ever in time recorded recently. And watershed dynamics, like Mr. Nicholson was mentioning, groundwater processing, estuary, hydrodynamics, biogeochemistry, and ecology. So with all that, increasing with human population in the watershed continues to add stressors that will interact with the effects of climate change and sea level rise. So, just wanted to put that out there. And this summer, next year, we will be focusing much at the CCNP conference on hearing from the younger generation and the young scientists like yourself, Alexis and Anush. So without further ado, I want to introduce Anush. She's a student at George Washington University studying environmental engineering and sustainability. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Anush.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining this conference, this roundtable, our presentations, and thank you, Randy, for the introduction. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen as well. Let's see. I want to make sure you guys can see my slides right as I go through them.
Looks good.
All right. So as Randy mentioned, hello everyone, my name is Anush. And this summer I had been working on creating tributary story maps which inform on spatial and temporal patterns and water quality. But first, a little bit about myself. I am a student at George Washington University, and I'm going to be graduating with a class of 25, and I study civil and environmental engineering and sustainability. And I'm interested in the intersections between science, technology, environmentalism, as well as communicating that to the public. And I was really drawn to this internship because of my interest in ArcGIS and science communication, and seeing the way that a medium like a story map, what role that medium can play in improving and improving the state of the Chesapeake Bay, and also in educating the public about it. And so my main project this summer was supporting the integrated trends analysis team, and their focus and aim is to combine the efforts of the Chesapeake Bay program analysts with those of investigators and governmental, academic, and nonprofit organizations to identify potential research synergies and collaborations that can enhance our understanding of spatial and temporal patterns and water quality. And they do this by producing tributary basin summary reports for the Bay's 12 major tributaries that use water quality sample data to summarize how tidal water quality has changed over time, how and which factors may influence water quality change over time, and the research connecting observed changes and aquatic conditions to its drivers. And I'm going to go ahead and link those reports. I'm going to do that after my presentation, but so my task was creating a template story map that can easily be replicated for the 13 tributaries as the reports are updated. So story map in essence is a web page that's created through ArcGIS Online that's visually engaging through interactive maps and figures and data to inform an audience seamlessly. So these reports are static, they're lengthy, and can't easily be updated. And so the story map will present the information concisely and in a more digestible manner and makes accessing specific information, such as long-term total nitrogen trends, easy through clicks. And it's not meant to be a replacement for the reports by any means, but it is meant to supplement it and present the information through a different medium that is of interest to stakeholders, such as watershed and conservation organizations. So the purpose of this is to ensure an outcome of successful programs by offering a unique form of communication that can bridge the gap between research, watershed organizations, and policy. And the audience for the reports are technical managers within jurisdiction agencies, local watershed organizations, and federal, state, and academic researchers. And so how I went about creating the story map was by reviewing a story map that already exists for the Potomac tributary and reaching out to conservation and advocacy groups to engage with them and gather feedback. So here I have some of the groups that I reached out to and talked to, and some questions that I asked were, what scale could story maps play in informing solutions to the general public versus to policy and decision makers, and also if they see a place within the story maps for data that they have collected. And the story map is not meant to be a product that is delivered to stakeholders, but it's also meant to be shaped by their needs and include information, projects, and data that they have and highlight them as resources. And so building a relationship with these groups created further interest in these in the story maps. And so I created a template using ArcGIS to create dynamic maps of water quality parameters. And then I am currently working on an example specifically of the Rappahannock tributary. And I'm hoping to share my results. And so as a warning and a precaution, this is in its draft form and not meant to be completely shared and spread around yet. And hopefully once it is completely open and accessible to the public, then we will make sure that if there is interest in accessing it, that it will be available. But this is an example of a story map specifically of the Rappahannock. And so it replicates the tributary summaries and the format of it very similarly. So you have a map of the Chesapeake Bay, a figure of the Rappahannock watershed, a map that displays its land use, as well as a description, easy access to videos that can elaborate more on that information, a section on water quality status, both long-term and short-term. So there's like a table of contents that you can see at the top. In case you want to focus, say, on short-term water quality, you can jump there. If you want to focus on long-term water quality and are more interested in, say, total phosphorus, it's something that will be easily accessible. And so one thing that was highlighted with these conservation groups that I was talking to was that there is a little bit of confusion when it comes to the symbology within these maps and trying to understand what does an increasing concentration of nitrogen mean. You know, you think something is increasing, and especially with the connotation of it being a nutrient, that means that it's something that's good. So they wanted more clarification on the symbology. So I ensured that for nitrogen, phosphorus, and chlorophyll A, that there is an elaboration on what that symbology is, that although it is green, that displays an improving water quality, but the reason that the arrow is pointing down because an improving water quality would mean a decreasing chlorophyll A, nitrogen, or phosphorus concentration, which is different for Secchi disc depth and dissolved oxygen. So there's also it's broken up by salinity zones. You can zoom in and press one of the stations, and it will tell you the percent change. And there's a section on factors that are impacting these water quality trends, such as hydrogeomorphology, the various sources, such as the different sectors that are impacting water quality concentrations, management, as well as tidal factors. And so one difference between the tributary reports and this story map is a climate change section, as well as a for community section. So with updating, the next update of the reports will include a climate change section, but as mentioned before, it takes time for these updates to occur and to make it accessible for the public, whereas including it within the story map that can easily be updated, it's done a little more seamlessly. So we have a section that highlights climate change and breaks that down into 3 separate categories. The first one, extreme weather and increased precipitation. The second one is warming water temperatures, and the third one is sea level rise. And so there are different graphs that communicate the way that that manifests within the tributary, but also focusing it on the scale of the Chesapeake Bay as well. So we have a slider that's NOAA, where you can see what the rising sea level will look like across the whole entire bay, the mechanism that impacts temperature change within the Chesapeake Bay, and how extreme weather impacts water quality and different nutrient concentrations and parameters in general. The next section is a for community section, and it serves as a resource tab that includes links to work done and data collected by conservation and watershed organizations. And here, Friends of Rappahannock is highlighted, and a link to their website is included. And as mentioned before, one thing that is of great importance is highlighting the work that these other organizations are doing that is not within the scope of, say, the integrated trends analysis team or the tributary reports. There are a limited number of questions that we can ask or that we can answer, and we would do more justice highlighting these organizations and these groups that might be able to answer or offer more resources to specific questions, such as, can I fish in my in this creek that is by my home, or like, how do I personally get involved, and how do I contribute to my local tributary, and really get my feet on the grounds and get involved. So one big aspect of the creation of the story maps was seeing how different parts of a system interact. So you're conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation and experience, reflection, reasoning, and communication as a guide to belief and action. So the story map synthesizes existing ideas images and expertise that already exists within the reports and presenting that in a new, original, or creative way. So for the future of the Bay, and gearing our attention towards how we can change and adapt to better serving and reaching our goals is definitely a continual pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Bay restoration community, which I think this internship does a great job in addressing, and ensuring access to college level students, the younger generation, and BIPOC communities in becoming involved. There was a recent report that came out by PBS about how urban and rural areas faced greater challenges than suburban areas under a new environmental justice index, which includes social vulnerability, environmental burdens such as air and water quality, and health vulnerability. So it's necessary that we have representation in research, policy implementation, and resource management. Another theme that I want to highlight is engaging communities, which I think the story map plays a great purpose in. So ensuring the long-term success of restoration efforts depends on the works of individuals and communities living throughout the watershed. And there's so much great work that is being done, and issues that are being addressed. And it's a matter of highlighting and bringing to light that work that is being done, and also ensuring that connection is established, and seeing the way that the information that is gathered within the Chesapeake Bay program, how that can inform their needs and vice versa. And also, of course, climate resilience. So yeah, ensuring that that is something that we are addressing openly and transparently, and seeing how we can think about it within the scale of the whole entire Bay, but also the different needs of the different tributaries. And so I think one thing that the Bay program can possibly do is establish a foundational framework of ethics, understanding, and approach to refer back to, and to keep the pursuit clear. So an example of this could be the framework of social ecology, which is an idea that I was exposed to recently. And a fundamental characteristic of social ecology is its framework for understanding how activities and behaviors affect the environment. And social ecologists examine how people interact with their environment and how these relationships might be modified to produce a more sustainable society. And it aims to create a society where humans are connected to and live in harmony with nature. And it's an advocate and a believer of politics that is powered by people and direct democracy. And I think establishing a framework, model, a political philosophy or theory that can serve as a foundation and can be referred back to could greatly help the Bay in ensuring that we do meet our goals, because I know that we are not on track in doing so for 2025. But that is pretty much the end of my presentation. I want to give a huge thank you to Randy and my mentors in the C-Stream cohort for supporting and teaching and mentoring me, and they've been really great.
Thank you so much, Anush. And yes, feeling is mutual. You've been nothing but a leader all summer from day one, from traveling all over Chesapeake Bay Watershed to just, being available for different things. So just want to thank you for that. All right. So Lauren, do you want to turn it over for the next part of this discussion, the Q&A?
Yep, we're asking any attendees to put questions into the chat. Randy, I know you had a question you wanted to start with. We can start with that.
Okay. Yeah, my first question was really just pertaining to the future, right? So with all that's kind of taking place in regards to the changes in our society and our environments, where do you see the future as it relates to things like the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, 2014 and the goals and the timelines, and what do you perceive in the future in that regard? And that's for any of us.
Randy, I'll jump in. And this might be a little area where some experience comes in its handy, is that, there's lots of discussion about the 2025 deadline and not meeting that, which looks like that's what's probably likely to happen. But I think also looking back over the field for the last 10 or 20 years, especially in the last 10 years, really since or I guess it's 13 years. Well, since the implementation of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, I mean, there really has been a tremendous amount of progress that's been made. Maryland, has basically upgraded all of its wastewater treatment plants to the limits of technology, or all of its major plants to the limits of technology. In that time frame, there's been a huge amount of work done on the stormwater front. Pennsylvania seems to be coming along probably a little bit more slowly than would be ideal, but they're coming to the table, and certainly Virginia is doing some really good things as well, and DC has been for a long time. So I think that it's important to recognize that that even though there's going to be some falling short on the 2024 deadline, that there has been a tremendous amount of progress that's been made. There's been a huge amount of investment that's been made from the local governments in these areas. And that we really just need to keep on that track and look at this not as a 10 or 20 year effort, but this is going to be a 50, 100-year effort. I mean, it took hundreds of years for us to get into the shape that we're in now. And I think we need to be realistic about, what it's going to take to roll back the clock on those impacts, and to really stick with it and to support each other in terms of these efforts. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that, Alexis or Anush? Okay. And this next question is for Anush and Alexis. I just wanted to know, how did you get into this industry? I know some of you had touched on that briefly, but was there something that happened throughout your growing up or your school or different things like that what led you into this field of study?
I'll start off. So I, in middle school, attended the Anne Arundel County STEM magnet program, and that kind of got me introduced into community involvement, especially around environmental science. And I was able to kind of focus my academic career around what my interests were, and my interests were mostly residing around the Chesapeake Bay. And so I, in 8th grade, was on this team, and I led a couple people in designing and implementing and installing a rain garden in a local resident's backyard that resided off the Patuxent River, I believe. And it was a 5-minute walk from my middle school. And I think that's when I kind of learned that this was definitely the pathway that I wanted to be on. And I've always just felt so close to the Chesapeake Bay, and I definitely am an aspiring conservationist. So I think that was kind of a very big stepping stone in my academic and professional career, specifically around environmental science. And then, like I said earlier, when I learned I loved farms too, specifically with this internship, that's kind of where it started. But that's kind of where my story began.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anush, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just was always kind of naturally drawn and inclined towards a work and a field that related to the environment. And I think throughout high school, within the human geography classes that I was taking, anthropology classes, and just online as well, I wasn't a fan of the narrative that I was being fed, that the environment and human beings are two separate forces that are always going against each other, rather than us viewing human beings as an inseparable part of the environment and something that we come from and are meant to serve. And I saw just how much work there is to be done and how much potential there is within that field, and it just felt like that's where I belong. It didn't really feel like a question. I was just more so naturally drawn towards it. And it's not something that's easy. It's something that's very challenging.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question from Larry Sanford. Do you want to turn your mic off and read your question, Larry, Mr. Larry? If you're able to, I can read it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just, we pay so much attention in the Bay program, and in all of our discussions about what comes after 2025 on cleaning up the main stem bay and on achieving the TMDL on the bay, but nobody talked about that today. People talked about cleaning up the watershed and restoring the function of the watershed streams. People talked about telling our stories better and communicating better, and people talked about reaching out to communities, right? And if those are the things that we care about, what I wonder is whether after 2025 a change in emphasis from, for example, the water quality of the deep channel of the main stem bay to the water quality of the streams and rivers in our watershed, and to more inclusion of our stakeholders and our citizens, whether that change in emphasis might be a better way to think about restoration.
Yes, these are just a few that were here. They were over 60. I would suggest I'll drop the link in the chat. Check out the symposium. There were several other topics that were covered there, and I think you'll get a lot more some other things to glance at. And I'd love to hear what your feedback would be after you check those out. But does anyone want to add or respond to that?
Yeah, so I know I personally love the humanitarian aspect of appealing to the people that the Bay actually impacts. So it's kind of a touchy subject when the people in the upper parts of the watershed, specifically with farmers, it's difficult to have a good connection with the Chesapeake Bay, because they're more so like the Susquehanna and the rivers that go and into it. So I think it's really, really important knowing your audience and knowing who you're appealing to. So at least in the aspect of my research, it is definitely more like qualitative and appealing to the individuals in the industry. So I want people to have the best working environment, and I feel like it's really interesting bringing up like the TMDL, because that's an amazing metric to go by, obviously. And you can definitely see how my like increase in the capacity of what's it called? A conservation district can increase the BMP output by like X%, which would impact the TMDL. But I think that it's really important to kind of appeal directly to the people, and the TMDL might not directly get the most amount of responses out of individuals who aren't really familiar with it.
Randy, I'd like to go, unless Anush, if you want to weigh in. I don't want to jeopardize your time, but do you have anything to say, Anush?
You can go ahead.
Thanks. So I would say to Larry, or Mr. Stanford, that I think he's on the right track. When I heard recently, that the focus was going to be less on the deep trench, the main stem of the Chesapeake, and on shallow, instead on shallow water habitat, I thought it's really about time. I recognize the value from a regulatory standpoint of looking at the water quality in the deep trench, and I think that probably should continue to remain something that researchers are focusing on in the background. But what matters to people around the Chesapeake Bay is largely the water that's in their own communities, whether it's their own streams in Pennsylvania or whether it's their own tidal estuaries in Maryland and Virginia. The dissolved oxygen in the deep trench is of relevance to very few people. That's not to say that I don't think we should continue to measure it, but I think that one of the things the Bay program I'd like to see done better, and it's easy for me to say, is to really focus on some of those local successes, because there are a lot of local successes that are going on that I think in the aggregate are going to be what add up to eventually a cleaned up Chesapeake Bay. But if you're looking at the clean or the high dissolved oxygen in the trench as sort of the final determination of success, you're going to be waiting around a long time, and you're going to alienate a lot of people who are going to be saying we've spent billions of dollars on these efforts and we really haven't seen much of a change there. So I think really focusing in communities with some of these qualitative stories, as Alexis had said, but also even looking at quantitative improvements on a smaller scale is important for us as a community in order to continue to get public buy-in to this effort.
Yeah, great points.
Thank you.
Well, it is 1:01, so we're done. But man, as you can see, we could clearly have this conversation for much longer. But I just wanted to say a complete big thank you for Eric Mickelson, Alexis Stelfox, and Anush for coming here today and sharing your thoughts and being brave and taking the time to answer questions and talk a little bit about yourself in general. Thank you to the speakers and attendees. Thank you for the guests who have come in and taken a moment from your time today. Our next webinar will be on September 20th, and we look forward to seeing you then.